Imagine standing in a room so profoundly quiet that you can actually hear your own blood moving. At first, it sounds like a distant, rhythmic hum, but as the seconds tick by, the volume begins to dial up. You hear the wet, mechanical click of your heart valves. You hear the sandpaper grind of your neck vertebrae rotating. Within minutes, the soft hiss of your nervous system becomes a roar, and you realize that your body is a surprisingly noisy machine. Humans aren't built for this kind of absolute silence. We've spent our entire evolutionary history bathed in the white noise of the wind, the rustle of leaves, or the distant thrum of a civilization that never shuts up. When you strip all of that away, the brain starts to panic. It begins searching for any kind of sensory anchor to hold onto, and when it finds nothing, it starts making things up. Silence sounds peaceful in a luxury spa commercial, but in the real world, it's a predatory force that removes your stability and leaves you trapped inside your own head. From engineered chambers to the most isolated frozen wastes on the planet, we are going to explore the quietest places on Earth and why exactly they are so terrifying. Welcome to the Wax and Vein Ledger, an archive of the world's mysterious places and what they do to the people who find them. And there's no better place to start than with the quietest room ever built. If you want to experience the absolute peak of artificial silence, you have to visit the anechoic chamber at Orfield Laboratories in Minnesota. This room is a masterpiece of acoustic engineering, designed to absorb 99.99% of all sound. It's lined with giant fiberglass wedges that swallow every vibration before it can bounce off a wall. The background noise here is actually measured in negative decibels. In this room, there is no echo. There is no reflection. If you speak, your voice feels like it's being sucked directly out of your mouth by a vacuum. It is the quietest place on Earth according to the Guinness World Records, and it is also a psychological torture device. Most people can't stand to be in there for more than 20 minutes. Without the tiny subconscious audio cues we use to understand where our limbs are in space, your sense of balance completely evaporates. You feel dizzy, nauseous, and profoundly disoriented. Congratulations, you've basically unlocked premium, high-definition access to the sound of your own internal organs. It turns out that when the world goes quiet, the only thing left to listen to is the one thing most of us are trying to ignore: ourselves. But at least in a laboratory, you know the silence is a controlled experiment. You can always open the door and walk back into the beautiful, noisy chaos of a parking lot. That isn't an option in Antarctica. While we usually think of the South Pole as a place of screaming blizzards and howling winds, there are moments where the air goes completely still. Because Antarctica is essentially a vast, empty desert of ice, there is almost nothing to generate sound. There are no trees to rustle, no insects to hum, and no flowing water. The snow itself is a natural acoustic sponge, absorbing any sound that manages to escape your lungs. In the middle of a whiteout, the silence is compounded by a total loss of visual perspective. You lose the horizon. You lose the ability to tell if a ridge is 10 feet away or 10 miles away. It's like your brain forgot how to render reality. Without a horizon to look at or a sound to listen to, your brain's spatial processing just gives up. You can walk in a straight line and still feel like you're drifting. At a certain point, it stops feeling like a place at all. It just feels like nothing. Some people find that kind of isolation majestic, but there is a different, more localized kind of silence that feels much more like a warning. If you head into the Hoh Rainforest in Washington State, you'll find one of the quietest natural spots in the lower 48. It's a place where the moss is so thick and the canopy is so dense that it creates a natural anechoic chamber. It is technically a living, thriving environment, but it feels like something forgot to happen. This is where your evolutionary wiring starts to trip over itself. For a human being, total silence in a forest usually means one thing: something is very wrong. In nature, silence is what happens right before a predator strikes or right after a storm breaks. Your brain shifts into a state of hyper-awareness. Every tiny snap of a twig or rustle of a fern sounds like a gunshot. You find yourself looking over your shoulder, not because you heard something, but because you didn't. Your brain goes from thinking this is peaceful to wondering why nothing is happening, and then it starts wondering if you should be the one making it happen by running. And then there are the places where silence closes in from every direction. Deep cave systems like Mammoth Cave offer a level of isolation that is almost impossible to replicate on the surface. When you are hundreds of feet underground, you are shielded from every vibration of the outside world. There is no wind, no light, and no life. If you sit still in a deep cave and turn off your headlamp, the darkness isn't the most disorienting part. It's the complete absence of anything to anchor your senses. This is where the brain really starts to freelance. Deprived of both sight and sound, the mind begins to hallucinate. It starts projecting shapes into the darkness and whispers into the silence just to keep itself busy. Time starts to distort. Minutes feel like hours. Without the rhythmic anchors of the sun or the sounds of the day, your perception of reality begins to fracture. It is a stark reminder that our consciousness is not a self-contained unit. It is a dialogue with the environment. When the environment stops talking back, the dialogue becomes a monologue, and that's when things start to get weird. Ultimately, silence isn't just the absence of noise. It is the removal of the sensory scaffolding that holds our minds together. We rely on the world to tell us where we are, how fast we're moving, and that we aren't alone. When that scaffolding is taken away, we're left with the unsettling realization that our brains are incredibly uncomfortable with a blank canvas. We are creatures of input, and without it, we start to unravel. Whether it's the engineered silence of a lab or the ancient, heavy silence of a cavern, these places prove that the world is never truly empty, even when it sounds like it is. Because when the world goes completely quiet, your mind doesn't. It just gets louder, and sometimes it says things you'd rather not hear. If you've enjoyed this little dive into the places where the world holds its breath, you might want to stick around. We're always looking for the next spot where the earth hides its secrets, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. You can keep up with our observations by hitting that subscribe button. I'm curious though, do you crave silence, or does a truly quiet room make you want to climb the walls? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and maybe keep a little white noise running in the background.